Yeah, I felt a little bit stuck. I like the idea of where I was working, but I wasn't particularly enjoying the job itself. I just couldn't find the next job within the sector. It's very competitive. I clearly had some kind of wish to be creative in some way. And for a long time, I didn't still see myself as being creative, but there was always some kind of creative thinking going on around other things in life. That kind of became my hobby and something that felt more meaningful to me and also an escape. I did have it at the back of my mind that having this and so keeping it going while he was still alive was important because it would be something to bring some kind of meaning into my life once he was gone. I think a lot of what I do actually does go back to childhood in some way. And it's about getting lost in an imaginary world in some ways.
Hi, I'm Claire, founder of Creativity Found, a community for creative learners and educators, connecting adults who want to find a creative outlet with the artists and crafters who can help them do so, with workshops, courses, online events and kits. For this podcast, I chat with people who have found or refound their creativity as adults. We'll explore their childhood experiences of the arts, discuss how they came to the artistic practices they now love, and consider the barriers they may have experienced between the two. We'll also explore what it is that people value and gain from their newfound artistic pursuits. This time, I'm chatting with Gaelle Jolly about her later blooming love for letterforms, words and books. Hi Gaelle, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's lovely to speak to you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Tell me what the creative outlets you currently enjoy are.
I think what I enjoy making the most at the moment, it's been a little while, is miniature books. Slightly obsessed with making small things. Really like making the tiny, tiny little books. And paper making is also something I've been enjoying for the past year or so. Just making my own paper, which I then turn into notebook covers and experimenting a little bit with natural dyeing as well. So I've been dyeing paper with avocado. Also really enjoy photography, which is less, I do use it for my business in various ways, but it's something that feels more free because it's not something I try to sell to anyone. I really always enjoy spending time, as a way of self-expression. It's quite a mindful thing that I can get quite lost in as well. So it's always there too.
Brilliant. A few things there then. And it's interesting that you already mentioned the difference between doing something for yourself and doing something that has kind of been turned into a business. So we will come back to all of those later. Did you have creative aspirations as a child?
I really can't say I did. I really deeply believe that everyone is creative, especially every child is creative. I think it gets lost along the way for quite a few of us. I think especially because traditional educational systems kind of see, first don't value it particularly much, but also tend to see visual arts and drawing as what it means to be creative or artistic. I certainly could never draw very well at all. So I can draw letters. That's about it. So I was more academic really. I was kind of serious child who enjoyed school and did well at it. So there wasn't really very much that it's creative. I took piano lessons, was very, very bad at it. I am not at all musical. I took ballet classes as well, which I still do ballet every day now. But again, it's not something I was, I didn't reveal myself to be a natural ballerina. So if anything, I think writing was the way I was more creative growing up, especially in my teens, writing journals and long letters to friends and terribly bad poetry. But really not making, not so much. What I do now, not really. I always loved stationery though, so there was something there.
It was already there in the background. Love for the paper. So which were your favourite academic subjects and what was your planned educational trajectory and beyond?
I was fairly good at everything at school, every subject. But when it came later on in my school years, I think my favourite subjects were English and philosophy. So English being English as a foreign language. French, grew up in France. Yeah, but I did a lot of maths and science because that's what the French educational system valued more. So if you could do it, you did a lot of it because that was seen as the mark of being good academically. I was doing math and science. I ended up doing quite a lot of that. I didn't know what I wanted to do at all. And there were some kind of turns and changes because of health issues as well. So I ended up studying English at university, which was, one of my favorite subjects, something I was good at. And the idea was, well, that will be useful in some way, probably at some point. But I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. And yeah, I didn't stop there. I've got 4 degrees. I went on from studying English to moving to the UK and studying sociology, and still didn't know what I wanted to do for a career. Yeah, it's a bit of a theme.
Yeah. How did you come to the UK then?
So I was studying English back in France and absolutely loved the country. And it was a combination of things. I had planned to move to the UK to study, as a way to carry on speaking English and enjoying English and going to a place I liked. And also academically, it felt like an easier thing to do than studying more in France. And by the time I actually moved, I had met who would become my husband. So
brilliant. With your burgeoning education in various degrees, it feels like, that there wasn't one thing that you definitely wanted to do. How did you then start actually earning money and going out and getting a job? What did you choose? Or did you choose? Or did things choose you?
Back in the old days where you bought the Oxford Times and went through job ads and tried to find something slightly appealing in there. My first job was working for a charity, working on the projects in kind of health and social care. I did that for a year. I was interested in trying to work for a charity and trying to do, not specifically that kind of work, but I'd done some volunteering while I was a student. So there was some kind of intention there. But then after that, I worked in a bookshop for a while, then went into publishing. So that seemed to make some kind of sense, but nothing really felt that enjoyable, or I couldn't see a path to something that I would really enjoy. But in the middle of all that, I started getting interested in historic landscapes in particular and historic buildings. And that came from a photography course I did. So photography kind of came into there, and just walking around Oxford and noticing things more. And from working in a bookshop, I worked in the history department, Blackwell's in Oxford, and just kind of noticing there was a book about garden history, which I ended up buying and reading and getting really interested in. And so, I decided to try to have a career in the heritage sector. So I went back to university, did an MA. I did end up working within the sector, but then kind of went back and forth and went back to study part-time to try to specialize a little bit more, did an MPhil on historic cemeteries. I was trying to make my way through the kind of heritage sector. So I ended up leaving my job, doing another job in order to be able to study at the same time, and got another job in the sector. I was sort of getting there, but not quite. I loved working within the sector. I loved working so the last job I had was with the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings, which is a wonderful place with a great history within historic conservation. I absolutely loved working there. The job itself was pretty stressful, and I was commuting to London and partly working from home. Didn't like either of those options. Yeah, I felt a little bit stuck. I like the idea of where I was working, but I wasn't particularly enjoying the job itself. I just couldn't find the next job within the sector. It's very competitive, very few jobs around. And then my husband got ill. And at that point, it started feeling absolutely ridiculous that I was commuting to London and sitting there in London and doing this job. So I decided to go for something more practical, find a full-time job in Oxford that could offer more benefits, allow me to take time off if I needed to, allow me to provide for both me and my husband if and when he needed to stop working at any point. So I ended up working in communications within higher education. And I ended up doing that for about 7 years. Yeah, until I left to work on my business full-time.
Yeah. So let's go back to the paper then, because you've already said about books, bookshop and publishing, and I can see that bit relevant to the paper that you do now. And as you said earlier, you always loved stationery. So how has that developed as a creative practice for you? And how does that fit in with everything else that's going on in your life, professionally, personally?
Yes. So after my very meandering answer to your question about there is a similar story to do with the other stuff. It's, nothing straightforward in my life, I don't think. I think the first thing I did, which was related to all that, was probably letterpress printing. But I clearly had some kind of wish to be creative in some way. And for a long time, I didn't still see myself as being creative, but there was always some kind of creative thinking going on around other things in life, like clothes and interiors and all of that kind of thing, and an interest in how things looked generally. And that kind of love I always had for letter forms, I suppose, and printing. Like as a child, I would turn everything I could find that had relief on it into a rubber stamp. I mean, the top of aspirin tubes, like I can print with that. Played with my mum's typewriter, all that kind of thing. So I did have that interest in that. And through the jobs I did end up doing quite a bit of my own graphic design as well. So I got interested in that kind of thing. So that's where it started. And that's all with the backdrop of thinking, I can never really make anything myself. I can't really create, but I can use a typeface on a computer. I can learn to print. That's where it started. So I also at about the same time, a little bit later, so I did a letterpress printing course. I didn't take it anywhere because it seemed quite inaccessible, even having done a course to, I could have had access to going back to the same place to use the presses, but I didn't feel confident enough to do that. So it was all a bit scary. So I did a bit of lino cut printing at home and, making my own rubber stamps again. But I didn't really take it very far other than the odd bit of, printing on with lino cuts. And then I started a photo blog because I started getting slightly obsessed with finding letters around the streets. So things like street signs and shop signs and ghost signs. We've got those beautiful old painted signs that have faded on the walls, and taking pictures of that and publishing that on the blog. So it all took quite a few years before I got from that to maybe I could try calligraphy. So I think modern calligraphy was becoming more fashionable at the time. And I started seeing things on Pinterest, and I started following blogs that talked about that kind of thing. But it was all a little bit scary because remember, I can't do any of this. That's the starting point. I can't do this. And I was almost put off learning by something you often hear calligraphers say, and I do say now, don't be scared by it, is basically to reassure people who think, well, I've got a terrible handwriting, so I can't possibly do calligraphy. They will say, oh, don't worry, calligraphy is nothing to do with handwriting. It's all about drawing letters. And I saw that. I thought, well, I can't draw. That sounds terrible. I will never be able to do it. And it is true, but it's not drawing as in drawing a picture is very different. So it's true in the sense that, yes, you don't need to worry about your handwriting because the letters are created in a slightly different way, which is actually easier. Yeah, so I gave it a go. I took an online class thinking, well, we'll be terrible at it, but it might still be fun. Let's find out. And I just caught the bug completely, became obsessed with it, eventually became better at it. Again, I didn't do very much with it at that point. It's about a decade ago. So I did a little bit like for friends when they, wanted something like new baby name to put on the wall, that kind of thing. But I didn't really use it for very much until I joined Instagram. Calligraphy became a little bit more serious at that point from seeing other people share things, being supportive, discovering a kind of lovely, supportive online community of creatives, basically, and taking part in challenges that forced me to post every day and create a bit of calligraphy every day. So that's why I decided taking it a little bit more seriously. And that coincided with my husband's health taking a turn for the worse as well. And I think, which was a coincidence, it just, something happened with his health, which at about the same time as I joined Instagram. There were no connections between the two. But then it became a means of escape, I think, for me. I was doing a job at the time which was perfect in many ways because it brought all the practical things I needed, and I had very lovely, supportive colleagues and employers. It was everything I needed, but it wasn't fulfilling. So having that creative endeavor on the side, which at the time would have been a lot of, calligraphy, but mixed with trying to do some creative photography, integrating calligraphy in photos to post that on Instagram. That kind of became my hobby and something that felt more meaningful to me, and also an escape from dealing with my husband's illness and very poor prognosis at the time. And then from there, I started getting work. So someone just commissioned me to do some calligraphy based on my Instagram. I didn't even say anything I didn't advertise myself in any way as doing it professionally. And that kind of started things very slowly at first, but that's where, looking at it as something I might make a living out of came from.
Yeah, that is very good to hear that you were able to get that kind of escapism, get that kind of meaning through this personal expression for yourself. And in fact, through trying lots of different things as well, which I think is super. You both knew that your husband was going to die. Did that knowledge prepare you? Do you think you were maybe using that creative process was going to help you in the future because you knew he wasn't always going to be there?
It's definitely something that I thought would be useful to have once he was no longer there. So we knew he was going to die. We didn't know when. It was all very vague. I knew it was going to happen at some point, and I knew I would be left on my own with a job I didn't particularly like. I had lots of friends, like I'm not isolated, but I did have it at the back of my mind that having this, and so keeping it going while he was still alive, was important because it would be something to bring some kind of meaning into my life once he was gone. So yeah, that's definitely something I thought about at the time, and something he understood as well, that I needed to spend some time on all of that because it was good for me then, it would be good for me to have it later.
Yeah. Tell me about Messages in a Bottle and how your creative ideas and actions developed going forward.
I feel like I can't really take the credit for the idea in a way, because I had this beautiful matte blown glass bottle, which I'd brought back from Visby on the beautiful island of Gotland in Sweden. And then one day I decided to, as one of those creative Instagram posts, to put a message in it. So I literally just wrote the word message in calligraphy and rolled it up and stuck it into a bottle and took a picture. And the glass blower saw my post. I think I tagged him in. And he suggested, wow, why don't I send you some bottles and maybe you can write messages for people in calligraphy and sell them. So it's basically his idea. And that didn't happen for quite a long time. I don't know. We didn't set it up for quite a while. But then Brexit came along and he messaged me again and said, before the extra restrictions actually come into play, shall I just send you some bottles? And so he did. And that became my first product. So they're those beautiful bottles, come from Sweden, and I do custom calligraphy messages in them. I was about to launch them just before my husband died. So I ended up being slightly delayed with something I got to focus on once my brain started vaguely working again, a few months after he died. That just did feel like it was really the beginning of going from just the odd, piece of work to actually, yes, I'm going to have a shop now and I'm going to sell this. Then COVID happened. So at that point, I was already also thinking about bookbinding. So I had learned a little bit of bookbinding from a kit that I'd got my husband to buy for me for Christmas. So I'd done a little bit and I'd bought a book. I taught myself a little bit. I was looking for in-person workshops and found this lovely workshop in Edinburgh, which I was going to go to in May 2020. So that didn't happen. So yeah, that ended up being postponed twice. I did go in the end. I didn't make it, but what I ended up doing was, so this was a workshop with Rachel Hazel, traveling bookbinder. She's wonderful. She had also published a book. And so I decided so I bought her book and decided I was going to make every single project in it in lockdown. I wasn't the only person doing that. I don't think when I started sharing this, other people were like, yes, I'm doing this too. And so I taught myself more bookbinding, just going through every single project in the book. And yeah, from then on, I started selling notebooks as well. So developed a range of notebooks. And yeah, bookbinding is something else that I got addicted to quite quickly, a little bit like calligraphy. And I do a kind of range of notebooks. Some integrate calligraphy as well. So customizable labels, that kind of thing. And some of them just have calligraphy in the design. And yeah, I've added some more skills on top of that. So last year I decided to have a summer of learning new things. I'm just going to build up for myself a little kind of creative course with various things. So that's why I learned to do miniature books, which I really wanted to learn. I learned to make paper as well. And I did another letterpress printing course and yeah, bought my own press as well. So and I have all of that going on. Paper making, letterpress printing on a tabletop press, and as well as all the bookbinding.
Yeah, crikey, a lot. Why do you think you were drawn to miniatures? I'm fascinated by miniatures. Why do you think you are?
I don't know what it is. I think there is something. I think a lot of what I do actually does go back to childhood in some way, and it's about getting lost in a imaginary world in some ways. Now, a lot of the products, I mean, some of my products are fairly straightforward, like this is a notebook, but a lot of the others have a story behind them. And, I have a time travel journal, an escape map. I like to have a story around it and to imagine them living in this kind of world of my own imagination. And I think miniatures fit really well into that. There's something of childhood magic about miniature. There's something magical about making books anyway, to me. It's like you start with a pile of A4 sheets or whatever, pile of all big, massive A1 sheet, and you turn it into a working book. I mean, that's magical. Making paper is magical. You take the contents of your shredder and turn them into paper. So I think miniatures really fit into that feeling of magic and bringing a little bit of magic into your everyday world, because you can use them as well. Like, yeah, they're tiny books. You can write in them. They can be your journal.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. I love that story. I'm glad I asked that question. got you explaining it for me. That was brilliant. So we're going to go on a bit of the kind of balance when you start making your creative thing into something that is work, and how that balances out. So do you feel now that you still experience the benefits you did when you started to get creative? So the form of escape that we talked about earlier, now that you are making them a business and you have a product range, do you still get those good feelings from it? And is there kind of any imbalance between those two elements?
It's tricky. I do not see making and being creative as a chore. I think it can become that if it's your business. I don't have that issue, but it's not quite the same. And especially something like Instagram, which I know a lot of people have very mixed feelings about these days anyway, but which was such a joy before. Now I try to turn it into something that explicitly markets a business. That makes it trickier. So I am working on trying to make it joyful again. That's one thing. In terms of making, I always enjoy doing. I mean, it's more stressful when you're making for somebody else. Like, it's always going to be more stressful doing a calligraphy commission, making a piece for someone that's very important to them. Like, you want to get it right. It's always going to be a bit less of the kind of escapist joy than doing it for yourself. But I still very much enjoy making. That's still there. What's a little trickier is that I just don't know how to have time off anymore. I find it very difficult to just do nothing, which I don't know, I'm sure I used to be better at that. And if I do something, it ends up being work, because what is now work is what I used to do as a hobby. That's what I do in my spare time. So And I've been thinking about that very recently because I had a day only last week when I wasn't very well. So I should take the day off. And I just couldn't. I ended up doing some work. So yeah, I'd say a lot of the joy is still there, but I guess it's not as carefree as it used to be for most things. And recapturing that feeling of doing it just for fun and escapism and your own sake is difficult. So photography does help a little. I mean, except I share everything I do. So, I take photos just for fun, except I then post them on Instagram, which is for my business. But at least I have no. It's not that I'm not ambitious with my photography. I do want it to look good and the way I want it to look, but I have no ambition to be a photographer. I have no ambition to do it for somebody else. So even if I do it for my business, it's never really for someone else. So I think that kind of safeguards it a little bit from that particular issue. I get more lost in it than anything else. I don't take photos and do something else at the same time in the way I do with pretty much everything else in life. I'm a little bit all over the place like that. But I think there's also a lot of value in sometimes doing creative things that you're bad at. And you know that it will never become something. You're not going to turn it into a job. So I don't really do it in the summer, but I tend to just knit one scarf a year. And I can't knit anything other than a rectangle in the simplest stitch. And I have no ambition to try to do anything else. I just knit my rectangles every year. And that's really nice because it is creative. You are making something out of nothing. Well, not nothing, but a ball of yarn. But I know I'm not going to be a textile designer. That's not going to happen. I'm not going to launch a knitwear brand. So things like that, or things that you would do. I enjoy cooking as well. Again, I'm not going to open a restaurant. No, we should do that. But it's still a way to be creative. That's separate. My next task is to find something else. I think I need something else now. Another creative endeavor I'm bad at to work on.
I thought that was a very good thing. You should try to do something you're not good at or you think you're not good at. My thing is, well, I teach a dance class and that's great fun, but I take part in another dance class and I'm not the boss of that dance class. And that is brilliant. That is the absolute escape. You just go along and have the most amount of fun and somebody else is doing all the thinky stuff about it that goes with it. So I completely understand that just doing something for the sake of doing something and how enjoyable that is. So you've talked about trying a new thing you're not very good at. Generally, do you have any particular aspirations for the future, whether near or far?
I'm actually trying to let go of having plans.
Cool.
Which doesn't mean I have nothing to say to your question, but I think, plans are not for me. They're too stressful. They just invite disappointment. So my latest take on things, I just want to be open to what comes up. So I have no plan for my business other than just carry on what I'm doing and see what comes up. I've recently started doing 2 part-time jobs, which I both enjoy and which kind of add variety to my life. So I'm trying to take some emphasis away from the business being everything, because at one point it was going to solve everything in my life. It was going to add meaning and provide my income and everything. So I wanted to, going back to actually the previous question, I wanted to be more fun. So I'm taking some pressure away from it. Apart from all of that, I always have ideas which I never get around to working on. So maybe that's what I should do rather than try to find something else I'm bad at. So I do want to experiment a little bit more with bringing calligraphy into my products even more, into the other things I do even more. So I'd like to work on having more calligraphy on notebook covers, maybe mix calligraphy with letterpress printing, doing some layering, maybe have some prints at some point rather than just notebooks. So that kind of thing I'd like to experiment with. Want to play around a bit more with natural dyeing of paper as well. What else? I'm also, I have a separate, knock on the door.
You want to go get it? Because I can wait.
Mind?
No, of course not. Is it something exciting?
It is. It's my garden waste sacks that I've been waiting for 6 weeks.
Good. I am so relieved.
Okay, sorry about that. Where was I?
Oh, I can't remember.
Okay, no, I know. Something else I started fairly recently, which I also want to develop, is I have a Substack publication, which is a slightly separate thing from my business. So this is where I talk a lot more about grief and about kind of personal side of my life, I suppose, which is, something I wanted to talk more about, but take out of, my business and my blog and my newsletter, because it's irrelevant, basically. It's just, I wanted to give it more space in a more appropriate place. So that's something I'd like to work on a little bit more. It's called Another Chapter. I'm sure there was something else. Yeah, I'm also thinking of possibly having an online pencil calligraphy course, because I've been teaching some workshops in pencil calligraphy, which is a really nice, easy, accessible way for people to try calligraphy without having to invest in anything. So I've got it at the back of my mind to turn that into something that people could access all the time, rather than just when I'm randomly doing a workshop for someone else. So yeah, I'm sure there are other things. I have lots of ideas. Actually getting around to implementing them is another matter.
Yeah. Do you write them all down in your own notebook that you made?
I do. Yes, I do.
Yeah, I have a few of those notebooks, and I go back and I've forgotten about that one. Good to have all the ideas, not necessarily the time to implement them, but good to have them there. That's been really lovely to talk to you. How can people connect with you?
My brand is called Inky Square, so my website is inkysquare.com, or you can find me on Instagram at Inky Square.
Thank you so much. It's been a lovely chat, and thank you for getting in touch with me.
It's been lovely, thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Creativity Found. I hope you enjoyed this episode and gained some value from it. If you did, perhaps you'd like to contribute a small monetary sign of appreciation, either by becoming a regular supporter from as little as $3 per month, using the link in the show notes, or if you are listening on a value for value enabled app, such as Fountain, TrueFans or Podverse, feel free to send a few sats my way. I also occasionally promote products that I personally use, so please use the affiliate link where relevant if you are buying from those fine companies. Thanks so much, I really appreciate it.